Good morning, and welcome to the Unitarian Church of Evanston. Besides being your bell ringer, I'm your worship associate today. I'm Andy Fisher. Whether this is your spiritual home or you are newly discovering this community, we are grateful to share this time together. We strive to be an inclusive and welcoming community, seeking truth and love and nurturing the human spirit for a world made whole. We are guided by our principles and values, which remind us in every moment and through every challenge that each of us is worthy of love and that we are all connected to the vast and beautiful web of existence. We come together to remember our kinship with one another and to hold one another in heart and mind with tenderness and careful attention, and to dedicate ourselves more fully to our shared values. People of all ages are welcome and important and a part of our faith community. We are blessed to have the children in the sanctuary for the first half of every service, and for the entire service about once a month. The nest in front is our designated area for families with young children, and we have a quiet fidget toys and activities and a kid-friendly order of service. Nursery care is available in room 11 every Sunday. As part of being a welcoming and inclusive community, we have some information posted on the screen that will help you orient you to UCE and our services. We have a few announcements. Today at noon, join other UCE families for a picnic lunch or snack at Penny Park. Please save the date, Friday, August 23rd, for an all-congregational potluck with the Board of Trustees from 6 to 9 p.m. This will be a fun, interactive, and engaging time for all ages. Please watch the newsletter for more information. Today's guest preacher is Reverend Charlie Arp, a longtime resident of Evanston and currently completing a chaplain residency in Naperville. He is a 2018 graduate of Meadville Lombard Seminary. We're happy to have you with us, Reverend Charlie. And now let us settle into our shared time of reflection, celebration, and inspiration as we begin our worship service. Those joining us online are invited to gather your chalice as we join in beloved community. Welcome to worship. The Unitarian Church of Evanston resides on land that was recorded as being transferred from the local Potawatomi community to the U.S. government in 1829, shortly before the Potawatomi in this area were forcefully removed west of the Mississippi River. This land was then sold to white settlers. We remember the ancestors of contemporary African Americans, the individuals, family, and networks of black people who built up our country's culture and economy, a role forced on them originally by enslavement. We acknowledge the intentional violence that landed in North American slaves and shores in 1619 has continued throughout the generations and remains a reality today. These acknowledgments are one small effort toward building long-term solidarity with contemporary communities. We commit ourselves to take what we learn here today and incorporate it into our lives and turn our thoughts into actions. Please join in our words of shared commitment. We name these realities with honor for all those ancestors, respect for our descendants, and gratitude for this land we use as sacred space. As we light our chalice, Liz Kennedy and Mary Dudick will light it. It's a symbol of living tradition. Please join in saying the adapted words by Tom Merton, and please follow the words on the screen. The words in the order of service are of a different reading. We are living in a history and a of the chaotic forces inside everybody. This is not something we have chosen. It's something we have created to avoid. Please rise in body or spirit and join in saying the words of our covenant. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. Before we sing our opening hymn, I invite those joining us online to greet each other in the chat, and those gathered in the sanctuary to turn to one another briefly to say good morning, trying to greet someone who is new to you.
Good job.
Let's see. Just had to do it after 1 minute. Let's see. Please stay after the service and continue your conversations. If you are new to UCE, please stop by the welcome table with the red cloth in the back of the sanctuary to get more information about our community. Let's keep creating new relationships and building kinship among us. Let's see. Please remain risen and join in singing our opening hymn, number 125.
Good morning, there we go. How are we all doing? Well, today's Time for All Ages is from a book called Justice Makes a Difference, the story of Miss Freedom Fighter Esquire. Oops. What do I do? There we go. There's Justice. Justice's favorite place to visit was her grandma's house. Grandma always greeted her with the biggest, warmest hug. Grandma always made Justice feel important. How many here have a grandma or grandpa that makes them feel that way? Well, a few. The best part of Grandma's house was her den full of books. Justice and Grandma would spend hours together in the den, talking and reading. Your name is destiny, Grandma had been telling Justice since the day she was born. Grandma reminded her often that being named Justice came with great responsibility. Justice understood that she was meant to serve and lead in her community. One day, Grandma asked, "What is in your hands to make a difference in the world?" Justice wondered, "What can I do? I am only 8 years old. How can I make a difference?" Grandma served in the church. She fed the hungry, sheltered the homeless, clothed those in need, and visited the sick. Grandma described this as living out her faith. Justice wanted to be like her grandma. She wanted to know how she could live out her faith. Grandma found Justice in the den heavy with thought. Grandma, what can I do to live out my faith? Aren't I too young? Oh, your age does not show what you are capable of. So don't let someone tell you that you're too young to make a difference. Do you remember that poem you wrote for the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., The Celebration? That poem made a difference. Justice remembered this and knew her grandma's words were true. Here's a book about someone who made a difference through her writing, Grandma said, as she handed her a book about Ida B. Wells. Ida was a journalist who used her writing to advance racial equality. She skillfully wielded her pen to wage war for justice. Yes, as an editor. So Justice picked up a pen and said, I can write for justice. Justice worked on a poem about love and peace and showed it to her grandma when she visited the next week. Words are powerful. They can be used in powerful ways to do harm or do good. I have another book to share with you, said Grandma as she handed her a book with a picture of a man on the cover. Words can be powerful, and music can be powerful too, Grandma said. I bet everyone here thinks music can be powerful. Justice read all about Paul Robeson, who sang freedom songs in more than 20 different languages. He was able to touch people's hearts through songs that empowered others to join in the fight for freedom and justice. Grandma, I want to sing for justice. Will you teach me some songs? Grandma began to sing. You know this one. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Awesome. Sometimes Justice would help Grandma in the garden. Grandma would sing while they worked, and Justice would hum along. Their music served as the rhythm for their digging and planting. For planting a garden was hard work, and it gave Justice a lot of time to daydream. She fantasized about what it would be like to travel around the globe. What's the most exotic place you've ever traveled to, Grandma? Justice asked. I haven't been much outside of St. Paul, honey, but I've traveled all over the world through books. This made Justice happy because she loved to travel through books too. After they were finished in the garden, Grandma gave Justice a book, of course, about a woman in a faraway land. Happy traveling, Grandma said. Justice read all about a country called Kenya and the work of Dr. Wangari Maathai. She was a global leader who organized the Green Belt movement with the hopes of restoring trees in her home country. She got mothers, daughters, grandmothers to take action by planting seedlings one at a time. More than 51 million trees were planted. Justice had an idea. Grandma, can we bring the community together like Dr. Maathai and start a community garden? Well, I think that's a wonderful idea. Should we invite others to help? Well, yes, said Justice. I'm sure there's people here to help with the community garden. During one visit to Grandma's house, Justice was quieter than usual. What is troubling you, Princess? Grandma asked. My friends at school said women can't be president, but I always thought I might grow up to be president someday. Justice, don't ever let anyone tell you that you can't be who you want to be. When Justice got home that afternoon, she found, guess what? A book, in her backpack about Shirley Chisholm. Justice read about Shirley, who became the first African-American woman to run for president in the United States way back in 1972. She called herself the candidate of the people because she was determined to fight for the rights of all people. I can be president one day, Justice thought to herself. And then she stood tall with confidence and said, I can fight for justice. I'm counting on it, Grandma said. So what else are you learning at school? Well, this week we learned about the legal case of Brown versus the Board of Education, Justice said. I remember attending school in a one-room shack in Alabama. We didn't have much, but we had a love of learning. Justice told her how she had learned that Brown versus the Board of Education was a case to attend school, a case where black children were not allowed to attend school with white children. Yes, Justice, I remember. The schools were separate and unequal. Oops, you okay? She's okay. Grandma, we also learned about the lawyer, Charles Hamilton Houston, who worked to end segregation in schools. Indeed, Grandma said. He said lawyers should serve as, quote, a mouthpiece for the work and a sentinel guarding against wrong. That's a funny word. What does it mean to be a mouthpiece? So Grandma explained. It means that you use your voice to share about the challenges people face in society, like ending hunger. What does sentinel mean? Let's find out in the dictionary. So Justice paged through until she found sentinel. A sentinel is a soldier or guard whose job is to stand back and keep watch. Wow, thought Justice, I can be a soldier for justice. I would say we could all be soldiers for justice. Finally, Justice was sure. She knew she could make a difference by becoming a lawyer. Her love of superheroes inspired her vision for future. She had a dream of becoming Miss Freedom Fighter Esquire, a superhero with a law degree and an afro. She was determined to use her education in the struggle for justice. Justice would live up to her name. As she lay down to bed, she found yet another book under her pillow. Justice began reading about Ella Baker, who helped the young people of the civil rights movement get organized. Justice fell asleep quietly humming Ella's song. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. To me, young people come first. They have the courage where we fail. And if I can shed light as they carry us through the gale, struggling myself don't mean a whole lot. I come to realize that teaching others to stand up and fight is the only way my struggle survives. We who believe in freedom cannot rest. We who believe in freedom cannot rest. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. The end.
Good morning. So I invite us now to our time of quiet reflection as we share joys and sorrows. If you have a joy or sorrow you would like to be shared with the entire congregation, you may write it in the book, which I currently have here, but it will be back at the back of the sanctuary. And you may also use the Google form found on the homepage of the church, as well as you can email one of our ministers. So we listen to these offerings with tenderness and respect. So let us all quiet our bodies and voices during this sacred time by breathing in together and breathing out. So these are the joys and sorrows that have been shared before our service today. So Reverend Eileen shares this sorrow. Lorna Galich, I hope I'm saying that name right, a member of UCE for more than 50 years, died peacefully on Friday morning. She had her children, Abby and Gavin, at her side, and she will be dearly missed. A memorial service will be planned in the near future. Bruce Kalick and Claudia Dancing shared that their beloved dog Sylvie died at home this past week. She added joy to their lives for the past 14 of nearly 15 years. Liz Kennedy Easton shares a sorrow. I was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer on July 1st. We do lift her up. Her joy, she writes, is the love and support and positive energy of UCE. Words cannot express the strength I get from knowing that UCE is standing with me through this journey. And I have bought red bracelets of thread for you as a symbol of how the threads of life heal us. Let it shine as a talisman of protection, strength, and positive energy for us all. Thank you. Sally Eggers reminds us of Martin Luther King Jr.'s words, "We must accept finite disappointment, but never lose infinite hope." And may his words cultivate greater hope for us all during these disconcerting times. Andy Fisher shares a pair of joys with us. On Friday, they had wonderful weather for sailing off Racine, Wisconsin in Sherwin's sailboat with Juan and his wife, who had never been on a boat before, up past Wind Point Lighthouse. And they are leaving for Holland in 10 days. And Andy also shares that despite failing a voice audition for the Savoy Airs production of Gilbert and Sullivan's Aolanthe yesterday, I got to help paint some of the scenery. Tony, I'm not quite making out that last name, shares her joy at the great love felt at the celebration of life here yesterday afternoon for Joan Taylor. Curtis Evans shares with us that today I have been sober for 10 years. Sean Talmadge also added his sadness at the passing of Lorna Galich. Bear with me while I find my place. So we are sharing these concerns of heart as a practice of beloved community. Together we expand our celebrations and lessen the burden of our grief. You are now invited to come forward down the center or side aisles to light a candle for the joys and sorrows on your hearts. And if you'd like a candle brought to you, please raise your hand. All right. So for all these joys, we give our thanks. For these sorrows, we give our love. Please join me now in a spirit of prayer and meditation. In the name of that great love at the center of our Unitarian Universalist faith, we hold ourselves together in this beloved community, lifting, holding, caring. These are difficult times. Life is often not easy, but it is made sweeter through the bonds of community, through the bonds of family, and through the hope that heals our sorrows, and for the celebration of all that gives us joy. Amen, and blessed be. Join me in the sung response. And as we sing our response, preschool through sixth grade are invited to head to their faith formation time. There's a river flowing in my soul. There's a river flowing in my soul, and it's telling me that I'm somebody. There's a river flowing in my soul. There's a river flowing in my heart. There's a river flowing in my heart, and it's telling me that I'm somebody. There's a river flowing in my heart.
Let's see. As we say in our covenant each Sunday, service is our law. UCE is called by our mission, values, and principles to contribute to our community, to form accountable partnerships, and to express gratitude through giving. Today's offering will be shared with Restore Justice Foundation, which advances legislation, change, trains advocates, and conducts research with a focus on rolling back the punitive processes of the past and replacing them with smart and safe policies for the future. We seek to support, empower, and promote healing and hope for people who are incarcerated, their loved ones, and their communities. You may text to give, mail in a check, put cash in the collection bowls, or give from our website. If you write a check, please indicate in the memo line if your check is for the shared offering or some other giving. The ushers will now come forward to pass the collection bowls down the rows. Please give as generously as you are able, and may what you give bring you joy.
I was about to say, thank you so much, Gregory, for your piano, your gifts of music to us today. The reading I've chosen comes from Zhang Zai, who lived from 1020 to 1077 of the Common Era. He is a Chinese philosopher during the Song Dynasty, and this is a short piece, but it is considered a fundamental document of the Neo-Confucian tradition. Heaven, or Yang, is my father. Earth, or Yin, is my mother. Even I, such a tiny thing, find a place in their midst. Therefore, what fills between heaven and earth I consider as my body. What directs heaven and earth I consider as my nature. All people are my siblings and cousins. All creatures are my companions. The greatest ruler is the eldest son of my parents, and his great ministers are the household retainers of the eldest son. To respect those who are great in years is the way to respect the aged and my own age. To be kind to the orphan and weak is the way to be kind to my own young. The sage is the one who embodies the virtue of heaven and earth, and the wise man receives the finest from them. All persons under heaven who are tired, crippled, exhausted, sick, brotherless, childless, widows or widowers are my siblings who are helpless and have no one else to appeal to. To maintain our awe of heaven is to show the respect of a child. To feel our joy in what heaven allots without anxiety is the purest filial piety. And deviation from the will of heaven is called a untoward disposition. Doing injury to humanity is to be called villainous. One who promotes evil is lacking in moral capacity, and the one who fills their bodily design by doing good resembles both heaven and earth. Understanding the transformations of this universe is being skillful in carrying forward the activities of heaven and earth. Plumbing the spiritual exhaustively is being good at perpetuating these intentions. Wealth, honor, good fortune, and abundance have as their aim the enrichment of our lives. Poverty, meanness, grief, and sorrow serve to discipline us so as to make us complete. And in living, I serve heaven and earth. Dead, I shall be at peace. Once again, thank you so much, Gregory. So, just a little warning. I put a lot into this service, and I'm running a little behind. So if you need to go at 11:30, I won't be upset, but I may be continuing to speak. So some of you know me. Susan and I went to school together, as did myself and Reverend Eileen. And I titled this reflection, this crisis we call capitalism. I find that in liberal congregations, there's kind of two groups of people. There are those who, when you start complaining about capitalism, yes, right on. And then there's the other, well, wait a minute. So I'll be honest, I'm on the yes, right on side of that divide, but that's okay. Because we all live in this crisis we call capitalism. It was very difficult on me becoming a young man. I graduated high school in 1981, and you may remember what happened in 1980. Ronald Reagan was elected president, and one of the first things he went after was college funding. My family wasn't particularly wealthy, and I ended up not being able to go to school once I graduated high school. I had no money. I did eventually qualify for a small scholarship, went one semester. The college experience was very disappointing, and I was struggling with life, and so I didn't go back. Got married, and in 1986 we moved to Evanston, Illinois, to live with the Reba Place Fellowship. Some of you probably know what I'm talking about. I was an ardent Pentecostal Christian, and I thought capitalism was awful, so I wanted to live somewhere where people were trying something different. So we lived with the Reba Place Fellowship for a decade. And it was years of healing and transformation for this young Pentecostal preacher's kid with lots of childhood wounds to be healed. But in my 20s, I went through a cycle of unemployment. I would have a job and then I'd lose a job. I'd have a job, I'd lose a job. I went back to school for 2 years, ran out of money again, dropped out again. While I was at UIC, University of Illinois at Chicago, I ran into my first Marxist radicals. Ever seen any of those people? They made an impact on me because I had already discovered in the Gospels, in the teachings of Jesus, that wealth and power were dangerous stuff, and that people who are devoted to love and caring in the world need to create something different. And so I began to pay attention to this guy, Marx. And of course, I knew he was an atheist, and I wasn't at the time. But I couldn't help but be compelled by what I was hearing and reading. So what's wrong with capitalism? I'm just going to name about 4 things, and there are more. It creates enormous inequality. In fact, the gap has been increasing dramatically in the 21st century. More people are getting by with less. Inflation currently is making groceries almost impossible for many people to afford. And one really striking example of this inequality is what researcher Lynn Braun calls the death gap. This is a book, you can find this book, and actually I realized I didn't put the name of the author of the book, The Death Gap, but you can look for it. And he studied the west side of Chicago. And this doctor discovered, he was an epidemiologist, discovered that the rates of death between downtown Chicago, which is where the wealthiest of us tend to live, was around 85 years of age. But by the time he got to the west side, that had dropped to 65, just in a few miles. This is what we live in. This is one of the things that's wrong with capitalism. And of course, when Andy met me and heard my title, he sent me a paper telling me about his ecological, environmental commitment to activism, and I know that is shared by many UU congregations. And guess what? It's driven by capitalism. Industrialization, creating and burning of fossil fuels is what drives human activity. And of course, the International Panel on Climate Change has over and over again, with 6 to 7 reports now, saying it's human activity, it's industrialization, fossil fuel burning. There's another thing wrong with capitalism that I'll lift up here, and this is what Marx discovered. It's in Capital. Said that there is a tendency for the rate of profit to fall. That as a new product enters the market, other people begin to try to compete with that product. And eventually, it becomes so widespread that the original profit that profit make drops. And that's a cycle that repeats itself over and over again. We call it the business cycle. A business does well when it's new, but then other competitors come along and they eat away at those profits. And that's been going on a global scale. Because in the 1990s in particular, you may remember a thing called the fall of the Soviet Union. I remember it vividly. There is no organized national level opposition to how capitalism runs things. It has spread everywhere, even in, at least nominally, communist China. They have a very large capitalist sector. And they claim that they're still trying to live out a Marxist worldview. And I think they may believe that. From a distance, it's a little tough to judge. But even more than this tendency of the rate of profit to fall, and it's historically been dropping since the 60s and 70s, and it'll recover briefly and then it'll go back down, and it never has gotten to where it was in the 60s and 70s. We're living at the end of a long cycle. And remember I mentioned that college funding was cut in the early 80s. Well, we've been living with that for all that period of time. And the workforce has, we talk about the crisis of education, why people can't read, why there is a lack of skilled labor, because we've taken the money away from colleges and put it towards other purposes. And one of the things that Karl Marx said was the most damaging about capitalism is that it does not allow human beings to become freely expressive, both physically and intellectually, as a meaningful expression of their inner potential. Labor becomes an alienating experience. It becomes just a means of survival, often felt to be monotonous and grueling. And rather than being directed toward creative or communal endeavors, the passions and energies of those who work for wages are instead consumed by practices defined as useful by the standards of capitalism. And that quote is from David Matthews, writing in the Spectre Journal. So that's a dark picture, and I've only begun. I could keep going. But let's talk about possibility of change. We know, I mentioned that the Soviet Union collapsed in around 1989 to 1991. And for a long time, this put an end to a cycle of revolutions in the Eastern world, beginning in 1917 in Russia, continuing up through Eastern Europe, China, and so on. But then Russia fell, and after Russia fell, there were no new revolutions. The last one, prior to the fall of the Soviet Union, was 1979 in Nicaragua and Afghanistan. There were two socialist revolutions in that year. And they just stopped. They stopped happening. Now, Hugo Chavez, in 1997, began a socialist movement in Venezuela and created the United Socialist Party. In the United States, in 2011, Occupy Wall Street movement grew into hundreds of encampments across the city in a space of weeks. I don't know how many of you remember that, but I was an older man at that point, had been waiting for people to wake up about capitalism, and Occupy Wall Street told me there was life in that dead thing we call socialism. And then Bernie Sanders ran for president twice as a self-identified democratic socialist. And we are now at the point where among our younger generations, they are more trustworthy of the idea of socialism than their experience of capitalism. So I have hope. This is why I spent so much time with that story. It's a long story, but educating our children is how justice gets born. So how do we learn from the past? Well, you don't have to call this alternative future we want socialism or communism. Those words are scary for a lot of people. Just call it the beloved community, amplified and globalized. We are no longer living in the era of our parents with the Cold War. And that said, capitalism continues to make lives miserable for the majority of humanity. And I think I can verify that with statistics. There is a very small group of people, and some of us here may be in this room, but I doubt it, could be, and it's okay, because I believe in humanity, and particularly I believe in the rising generation. My children and my soon-to-be grandchild, I'm really excited to have a grandchild coming in January, and those younger generations, I'm 61. I'm not going to live to see the fulfillment of my dream for a world where capitalism isn't controlling everything. But I do believe in the children. The children are the future. It's been said so many times. And I genuinely believe it. So I hope my message has landed okay with you. Some of you not, and you'll let me know afterwards. I'm open to conversations. So I'm going to close by returning to the reading from Thomas Merton, because I believe this is so true. And it's hidden, sorry. We are living in the greatest revolution in history, a huge spontaneous uprisal of the entire human race. Not a revolution planned and carried out by any particular party, race, or nation, but a deep elemental boiling over of all the inner contradictions that have ever been, a revelation of the chaotic forces inside everybody. This is not something we have chosen, nor is it something we are free to avoid. Thank you.
As we extinguish the chalice, please join in saying the words on the screen by the Reverend Elizabeth Sell Jones. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Please rise in body or spirit and join in singing our closing hymn, number 1018.
in that land where I'm bound.
my benediction, I quote one of my chaplain colleagues, Reverend Deborah, and I'm sorry, her last name is, that happens as you get older. It's a simple benediction. Go be love. Blessed be.